Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm John Dykes, and today I am delighted to be joined once again by Kevin Graham. We're a few minutes late because the internet seemed to have crashed. I think the Celtic gremlins were back in play there, Kevin, trying to stop us from broadcasting. What do you reckon?
5G conspiracy theories and Russians. Right. It's all about this vaccine. It's gone mental. Everything's gone mental.
That was just a temporary outage, I think, but we're back, which is great. So, Kevin, there's plenty to discuss. As we are on live, we know that the Celtic AGM is up and running. I'm trying to get live updates on that as well. Neil Lennon was late. The AGM is underway. Dermot Desmond reappointed. Ian Bankier re-elected. Are you expecting anything unusual or surprising from today's events at the AGM?
I found it quite unusual. I had a quick look this morning on one of these Glasgow websites, and what it actually says was that they reckon that they're going to discuss a director of football, really? which I found a bit weird. For obviously this website's maybe been given a nod about something. I don't know if they have, but they says that they were going to discuss a director of football, also refunds for this season as well. So,
is it you would say one of these websites or podcasts that is in the know? I mean, that's one of these things that we're aware of, Kevin, in relation to, for example, people who for a number of years have been spoon-fed information from the clubs. Is it one of these websites that you're referring to?
It's a mainstream website, aye.
Oh.
So I think they've maybe been given the nod about some things that may get discussed at it. So
I can see that Peter Lawwell has backed Lennon, and he's responding at the moment to the sleeping at the wheel claim. I think I said they were intoxicated at the wheel rather than sleeping at the wheel, Kev.
I'd say they'd crashed their Rolls Royce into the swimming pool.
Aye, be here now style.
Aye.
Absolutely right. So we'll keep an eye on that AGM as it goes along. It doesn't look as though we're going to get anything groundbreaking today, like an announcement from Peter Lawwell regarding his own future. That's something that we had spoken about during the week, Kevin. Do you think that is something that is in the more immediate kind of term rather than a long-term announcement?
I don't know. I think that announcement will be made. I mean, I've got nothing personal against Peter. I've been in plenty of meetings with him. I know what he's like. I know that he does do what he reckons is best.
You know how that sounded there, Kev?
I've
been in plenty of meetings with him. Did you call him Peter there? Did you just call him by his first name?
See, that's what he does to you.
Wow.
That's where he gets paid the big money. Anyway, what I'm going to say is, I think 17 years for a CEO is far too long for any sort of business, and we need a change. We need a change of direction. And I think the announcement that Peter Lawwell will be leaving will happen sometime. Hopefully it's on Axon. Maybe he'll give us the world exclusive that he is leaving. But as I say, the one thing came back to me yesterday, Paul, and I'm not going to. You'll know exactly who I'm talking about when I actually say this. And he says it off air, and it was about Dermot Desmond and Peter Lawwell, and he says. This guy feared the day that Celtic weren't run by Celtic fans.
Yeah.
And that always stuck in the back of my mind. And I know people shout that Peter Lawwell's not a Celtic man, Dermot Desmond's not a Celtic man. I do disagree with that. I really do disagree with that. They make decisions based on business rather than we would make our decisions based on emotional. But I reckon I know for a fact Peter Lawwell's a Celtic fan. And Dermot Desmond wouldn't be involved in Celtic for as long as he is, with no money making opportunities if he didn't have an emotional attachment to the club as well. So that always sticks in my mind. If Dermot Desmond was to sell up, who would we end up with? Would we end up with and what happens if we get a CEO that comes in which is not a Celtic man? Which is like a CEO that's there to run us like a business, more of a business than what we're currently run. It's a frightening thought, and we know the guy who says it, Paul. And for it to come from him, who is no fan of Peter Lawwell, not one fan of Peter Lawwell at all. I thought it was quite an interesting comment. I thought it was quite a scary comment for him to actually say that.
Yeah, well, I'm going to run through some of these because I think most people will be tuning in online to the virtual AGM. Peter Lobo calls for unity. I use his full name, Kevin, because I don't know him as intimately as you do. But he is calling for unity and says criticism only benefits those who want Celtic to fail. I don't buy that for a second. Are they looking for a situation where Celtic supporters or anybody with any form of platform hasn't to criticise the goings on at Celtic? That's ridiculous.
We have to criticise our football club. Even when we're going well, we have to criticise our football club. And for him to say that is absolute nonsense. I sit here and criticise, and no way in the world do I want Celtic Football Club to fail. No way do I want Celtic Football Club to fail. So for me, that's just absolute rubbish. Absolute rubbish.
Well, here's another rubbish one for you. Peter Lobo thinks that the communication between fans and the board is up to scratch. Now, it does hail the SLO, and I've got a lot of time and respect for JP Taylor, so big shout out to JP. However, and I think JP's contact with the support is fantastic. I mean, he does exactly what he's able to do. We all know that the size of club that Celtic are, the amount of people that are at a home game, Kevin, you need more than one SLO. I mean, some time ago you interviewed the two fellas from Feyenoord. Remember the SLOs from Feyenoord? Did they have 5 or 6 at that time?
They had 3 full-time and 7 on match days. So they had basically a full team. Sorry, a guy chatting my door for a parcel.
All right.
No, they had 7 on a match day and 3 full time, and that shows. And we're a far bigger club than Feyenoord.
Well, I was going to say, what kind of crowds do they get, Kev? It's certainly not 60,000 at their home games, is it, or anywhere near it?
Can you put me on for 2 seconds?
I'll put you off for longer than that, boy. Hurry up. I'll have a wee look at the AGM as Kevin goes to check his parcel. If indeed that is who's at his door. Who knows who turns up at the door of Kevin Graham. But Peter Lowell is coming away with some belters today at the AGM, and feel free to get involved in criticising the things that you are able to criticise, because I think that's a nonsense to suggest that we can't criticise Celtic because it only benefits those who want to see us failing. I don't believe that for a second. Is he expecting everybody to be sycophants and just agree with every decision that's made at Celtic? I think that's a nonsense. Peter Lowell also responds to sleeping at the wheel claim. He insists that Celtic are not sleeping at the wheel. They've invested heavily in the club this summer and dismisses those suggestions. Well, I think that the larger issue with that, Kevin, welcome back to the show, Kev. I hope that parcel was worth it, mate. A wee last minute Christmas gift there for the missus.
Oh.
The sleeping at the wheel claim isn't about the transfer window this season. It's about a long-term deterioration of our performances in Europe. It's about replacing Brendan Rodgers with a manager who was nowhere near that level of manager. And it's about a number of transfer windows where, you can say we've invested, but look at the calibre of player that we've got. We're continually trying to find the next Van Dijk, and we've not found one for I don't know how many years. We've not found a £2.5 million player, Kevin, that we can turn a profit on for years and years. Yeah, up until January 2020, but we're still trying to do it. By the way, Soros come good, thank God. But Klamala's, if we were to sell Klamala tomorrow, we'd probably at best get our money back, but at worst probably, loan him out for the last couple of years of his contract, because that's what we've done with virtually every signing around about that amount. So it's not about what you've just done in the transfer market. It's certainly about your Champions League performance over the last 9 seasons. Or am I picking that up wrong, Kev?
No, you're not picking that up wrong. It's the only part of the business model that actually works is every so often we get a player that we sell. That's the only part that it works. When you look at, I'm sure they've probably got key performance indicators with regards to sponsorship money coming in, season tickets. The only time he's ever got it perfect was when he appointed Brendan Rodgers. Every other time it's been a gamble. Could actually be seen as a cheap option. It could actually be seen as taking a risk. Basically, we've had 9 years to have a go at the Champions League. 9 years to have a go at the Champions League. And the only manager that's delivered on a regular basis to get us into the Champions League group stages was Brendan Rodgers and his 3 seasons, which was unbelievable. You had the Ronnie Dyler project, which basically didn't get us into the European, where we wanted to be, because at that time, well, let's not, the Scottish League wasn't the be-all and end-all. So Europe was where we're going to measure ourselves, and we had some horrendous nights in Europe under Ronnie Dyler. And we had some great nights. The Inter Milan game at Celtic Park was what a fantastic night as well, but we didn't get a result. We didn't get a result that night, but it was a fantastic game. It was a brilliant game. So, as somebody's just put in, it's four qualifications for the Champions League in 12 years.
Yes.
Countless untold lost millions of pounds.
Tens and tens of millions of pounds, yeah.
Stevie Mullen last week came out with a list of players that we had signed in January. And as I says last week, that list could actually get people put in the jail, the amount of money that we've wasted on players. So our criticism is not of them spending £12 million in the summer. Our criticism is of them not reading the room and not getting their long-term strategy right and always looking like they're doing it ad hoc.
Kevin, you're spot on. You're spot on.
So it's...
Well, they've been caught with their pants down with Rangers this season. There's no doubt about it. There's been a complacency that's set in at Celtic Park in the highest reaches of the boardroom, and there's no doubt about it. So I think this is all bluster as far as I'm concerned. And by the way, I didn't come on to rip everything Peter Lobo says to pieces, but as I see it coming through on the live thread, I'm disagreeing with virtually every single part of it. Peter Lobo understands the fans' frustrations. He thinks that he understands, but says it's slightly over the top. Right, okay, maybe he's talking about some of the minority within the protest, Kevin, who have got a wee bit kind of violent or aggressive, perhaps. Maybe that, yeah, I think everybody would agree that's over the top. But I don't think protesting's over the top. But again, how far removed are they if they think that we're only protesting because we've had a couple of bad results? It's far deeper than that, Kevin.
It is far deeper than that, and what's getting brought up now into the public domain has been getting said to them by supporters groups for years and years. It's just now, and he can quite rightly deflect and say it is over the top because it's only became public over the last 5-6 weeks when we've been going through this bad spells, and that's very, very easy for them to deflect. That's very easy for them to put out that narrative. By the way, this is all hyperbole. This is all overreaction because we've only lost. Well, we've lost one cup tie in 36. For whatever it is, that's a load of rubbish. They know behind the scenes there's been supporter group telling them, by the way, if you mess up this year, hell menges, because history won't be kind to you. And they've been playing with us for years. They've been playing with this moment turning up for years. As I says, when we walked out of Hampden that night, when we'd done the treble. And
was that with you that night? No, it was the Motherwell. It was the Motherwell game. Yeah.
When I walked out of Hampden that night, absolutely chucking it down, I had the CSC's massive banner. It was soaking because it was lying on the track.
Is that the Tommy Gemmell banner?
The Tommy Gemmell banner. I mean, it is
cracking banner.
It's 17 foot by 10 foot. Imagine that sitting out for 2 hours in the rain. It was heavy, really heavy, carrying it back to the bus. And the way they appointed Neil Lennon says to me at that point, you've never listened to a word that we've said over the last 5 or 6 years.
No.
You think you can get away with this. And at that point, I said this yesterday, I think at that point they chucked their own game plan out the window and went to short term. They didn't start looking long term, they went to short term. And this summer, they've went to short term as well. They've made a massive investment, but the problem was they didn't believe in their own game plan, and their game plan somebody should have been sold in the summer.
Their own strategy, yeah, you're right. They've actually changed from what you would expect, didn't they? Yeah. Before we go any further, because I'm going to get delved into every other point prior to Peter Lobo taking the stage, because obviously Resolution 11's part of that as well, Kevin. But just to pass on our deepest condolences to an absolute legend of the football world in Gerard Houllier. who unfortunately and very sadly died today. He's a manager who there were discussions at one point with Celtic to bring him in as a manager. He would have been a fantastic manager at Celtic, Kevin.
He would have been. He had already signed the contract with Liverpool, and he says that he wasn't going to renege on it, but he did recommend Joe Venglos. He recommended Venglos. When you look at, I've read some things online for Liverpool fans, and they say he started what they're now saying. They're saying that he brought in the culture change of the club, which took them away, obviously, which Souness destroyed when Souness went there. And they went through a load of managers who were probably more in the boot room type of mould.
Yeah. And
football had moved on, and they're saying that Hooley was the catalyst for what we're seeing now at Liverpool Football Club.
Okay, so you look at Gerard Houllier, let's say 2000, he's a manager of Liverpool, and he implements a culture change which takes 20 years to breed success. Yet Neil Lennon thought we could change the culture in 3 days after that game, where he came out talking about a culture change, which I found pretty interesting at the time. So yeah, it took 20 years for Liverpool to win the league, even though the culture change was implemented in about 2000 when Houllier was in charge. Now, Ian Bankier assesses the year, and he says it's a very successful year on the pitch despite the season being halted. We're in a very promising position with £30 million in the bank. But let's have a look at some of the resolutions, Kevin, because I know that in your previous life within the affiliation you will have been dealing with a lot of topics such as resolutions, etc. And resolution 11 not carried over. 97.18% have voted against the board referring the SFA to UEFA with regard to its licensing practices. Resolution 11 is not carried over. Bankier is satisfied with the decision. He insists the shareholders has not misled shareholders over this issue. Is that resolution 12/11 now finally dead, Kevin? And I mean, I know that there's been a huge amount of work done in the background by a committed group of Celtic fans to keep it alive this long.
I feel extremely bad for the Res 12 guys, even though it's now been changed to Res 11, probably deliberately, to tell you the truth. I think it's been dead for years. I think the club have parked it for years, and these guys have just kept on going and going with an extremely strong case. And Celtic, once again, have looked at their corporate entity, their corporate brand, and went, well, there's no point in us chasing this because this could be bad for business. It's the same when they're hiding behind the business speak, ain't it? Like they've done with quite a lot of stuff that's going to come out with the boys' club stuff and that as well. That they're hiding behind their corporate image, and they say that they're a club like no other when it suits them. And other times they just, come on, that licensing, the Res 12 was utterly blatant cheating, and the evidence is there. The evidence is there to bring down the guys in the SFA who were there. I mean, you have a look at the 5-way agreement. You have a look at the
Peter Lawwell's never seen it, Kevin.
Well, I've seen it, so surely he's seen it.
Well, that's what he said last year, isn't it?
I'm sure Eric Riley, who's been copied into all the emails, did he not forward it on to him? No.
Yeah. Well,
does that know what happened? Is that know what happens? Does Eric Riley, who was it the lawyer, board member, stadium? Maybe
those messages self-destruct, Kevin, like the old Inspector Gadget cartoons. It's as ridiculous as that. If you've seen it, I'm pretty sure Peter Lawwell's seen it, but he claimed last year that he hadn't. So there's a lot of reappointments. Tom Allison, Dermot Desmond, Brian Wilson, Ian Bankier reappointed, Sharon Brown reappointed. I think there's a feeling among Celtic fans that we really are disconnected to the vast majority of the board. There seems to be a lot of faceless entities, Kevin, who, you're always going to have figureheads. But a lot of these people, for me, are just faceless entities in suits that are so far out removed from what the Celtic support want. But, just get re-elected year on year. There seems to be no creativity, no free thinking in that Celtic boardroom whatsoever.
There isn't. And I think it's... what do they want Celtic to be? I mean, it's completely different to what we want Celtic to be off the pitch. On the pitch, we all want Celtic to be utterly successful, especially we have been domestically. We want to have Celtic to have an image off the pitch, but basically, our PLC just want us to be Man United, and that doesn't sit right with me. I've been very vocal on that, and they just make bad decisions. They make bad decisions based on what would Man United do here. For me, anyway, that's what I think. They make decisions on what would Man United do, but then they're not willing to actually pay the cash to get an elite manager. Well, you look at Man United appointing Solskjaer. And we know quite a lot of Man United fans who says at the time
we were with them on the day, weren't we? The day that he was appointed.
And they says they had no trust whatsoever in the people who run the club to make the right decisions, because they wanted to keep Mourinho wholly for that reason, was because we didn't trust the Man United board owners to actually make the right decision, and they've been proved right. I mean, they have been proved right. And it was we talk about sentiment quite a lot over the last couple of weeks. Holy Gully Solskjaer, even if he got our job, even if he got the Celtic job, Celtic fans would have been, what's he actually done to deserve getting the Celtic job?
No, you're spot on.
Never mind the Man United job.
We were with someone who's been involved in United We Stand, the fanzine. He'd been involved in it for a number of years, if not decades, Kevin, on the day that Solskjaer got his job at Manchester United, and he was devastated, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm. He was, because it was ruining a hero. It was ruining the legacy of a guy who's got legendary status at Man United. He's got legendary status in world football with that winning goal. And it was a horrendous decision, and it's still proven to be like it as a horrendous decision.
You know, the big thing that you mentioned again, elite managers, and this isn't a dig at you, because it was Jim Orr that pulled me up about it, and he asked me one day a couple of weeks back, what is an elite manager? You know, because all these terms get thrown about in football, don't they, Kevin? And you start using them yourself because you think in your own mind, I know what an elite manager is. But then you ask the question, when Brendan Rodgers was appointed manager of Celtic, was he an elite manager? And you look at his record, and you look at how many games at that point he had managed when he took over at Celtic. I would argue that he probably wasn't an elite manager. Yes, he had managed Liverpool by that stage, but he was a failure at Liverpool. He didn't win anything with Liverpool. So he was a failure, just like Roy Hodgson was a failure. And someone say, but he didn't get to number 2 in the league. If number 2's nothing. No one remembers the runners-up, Kevin, and he was an absolute failure. Now, that's not taking away what he achieved as a manager of Celtic. He gave us some phenomenal memories of modern times. He's a massive part in the 9 in a row. He's a massive part in what could be a quadruple treble. But I just think that, you know, there's a whole perception around this elite manager terminology that, you know, Brendan Rodgers was an elite manager. Was he? I think he could be. He could be an elite manager. When we got him, when Brendan Rodgers was appointed manager of Celtic, he had won one trophy in his entire managerial career, and that was a playoff with Swansea. He'd spent 3 seasons in the Championship, Kev, just as long as he had spent in the Premier League, 1 with Swansea, 2 with Liverpool. But Celtic fans, you know, to a man and to a woman, were happy with his appointment, and we turned up in our droves on the day he was actually announced. So I don't think an elite manager, any elite manager, would ever consider coming to a club that did not have the potential to win a European trophy. I think that's what an elite manager is. Someone who is at that level of management. So he wants to manage at that level, be that in Spain, Italy, Germany, France, England. So these managers will never be in Scottish football. Steven Gerrard was a rookie manager when he came into Rangers. He's doing very well this season. Brendan Rodgers was, in many ways, a failed Liverpool manager when he was appointed at Celtic. So this elite manager thing, Celtic fans and football fans in general must realise that Celtic will never appoint an elite manager. I
think if you have a look at it, there's certain managers that you'll see rebound round about the top clubs in Europe. Guardiola's one of them. If you look at the clubs that he's managed, Man City, Barcelona, Bayern Munich. Ancelotti as well, even though he's at what some people would term a smaller club at Everton, but you look who he's managed. Anytime there's a big job comes up, Ancelotti's named in and around for a big job. Mm-hmm. What was Brendan Rodgers an elite manager? No, but he was the highest level of manager that Celtic could appoint. When you looked at the names that were out there, and if we were being cynical, if we were actually being truthful, probably the only reason we got Brendan Rodgers was because he was a Celtic man. that was the only reason that we got Brendan Rodgers. If Brendan Rodgers had no contact to Celtic whatsoever, I very much doubt he would have got him.
There's so many elements. I know you've done loads of research, Kev. I know you've done loads of research in the appointments of Neil Lennon, Martin O'Neill and Brendan Rodgers. But there's so many elements, isn't there, that are similar to O'Neill's appointment when you compare it to Rodgers. And O'Neill obviously had more success as a manager before he came to Celtic. 2 League Cups down there. He had taken Leicester City, an unfancied club, into Europe more than once. And he was sought after. He was massively sought after when Celtic got him. So I think there are similarities, and one of the key areas of that is what you've just said there. There had to be that element of a Celtic state of mind. Otherwise, Martin O'Neill wouldn't have come to Celtic and Brendan Rodgers wouldn't have come to Celtic. And we could talk all day about whether or not Rodgers was a Celtic man as such. I mean, I'm led to believe he had never set foot at Celtic Park until the day that he came up to actually sign as a manager. And as far as I'm aware, that is the truth. So was he really a Celtic man, or did he have an inkling for Celtic with his background, with a lot of people in his area probably supporting an English club and Celtic?
I mean, you have a look at Martin O'Neill's never had the fact that he followed Sunderland when he was growing up as well. But Martin O'Neill's father actually says to him, if you get the chance to go to Celtic, walk to Celtic Park. Because Celtic, Man United and Sunderland made a massive influence in Martin O'Neill's life. If you have a look at it just now, you have a look down in England, you look at the managers down in England. Would Sean Dykes leave Burnley to come to Celtic? Not a hope. Not a hope would Sean Dykes leave. Not that I'm saying I want Sean Dykes to manage Celtic, but if you're looking for a manager who's done well in the Midland English Premiership with an unfancied side, then Sean Dykes is maybe the same as Brendan Rodgers. Sean Dykes wouldn't leave Burnley to come to Celtic because there's no emotional attachment, unless you were promising him absolutely Premiership money.
But then does that not say more about his lack of ambition as a football manager, because he's never going to be in a position that he would be in at Celtic with regards to Champions League aspirations?
I don't think so. I think it's just the English Premier League seen as the be all and end all to two English managers, and even us. You hear all these guys who are into expected goals and the athletic and stuff like that, and they all talk about you need to get a progressive manager. I mean, we would get a young manager from Europe. If you got a young manager for Europe, you're selling Celtic as a stepping stone again for them to move on to the next level. Brendan Rodgers used us as a stepping stone to get on to, well, as Leicester the next level. That's an argument for a whole other podcast. But he used us to get back into the English Premier League. And the first time he got that opportunity to go back into the English Premier League, he worked his way out. But
you look at him now, and you look at the trajectory, the downward trajectory that Arsenal are currently on, and the pressure that's mounting around Arteta's position at Highbury, because I still call it that. I know it's not Highbury anymore. But you look at that, Kevin, right? That's probably, I mean, we were talking about it this morning, there's probably 2 or 3 jobs at the moment over the next couple of months that are going to become available at the top level in English football. Arsenal potentially is one of them. Because they're ruthless. They're totally ruthless down there. Borussia Dortmund are ruthless. That's what happens at that level of football. So if Brendan Rodgers goes to Leicester and does well, as he has done, both in Europe and domestically, and a job like Arsenal, which will always be regarded as, what would you say, a top 6 job, even though they're nowhere near that at the moment. If you look at the league positions, you still look at them as a top 6 club, don't you, down in England. Brendan Rodgers' name will be in the top 3. So he knew that when he took the Celtic job. He's thinking not just 1 step ahead, he's thinking 2 steps, 3 steps ahead. Because he's a mercenary. And by the way, he is. I'm not trying to have a dig at him. He's a mercenary. So that Arsenal club blazer would be on him before you could even consider where he's taken Leicester and where he could take Leicester. He'd be gone. He'd be signing for Arsenal. absolute 100%. But a part of that is Celtic were a part of that, Kevin. You know, let's use Celtic to get back on that ladder. And he knows you just got to look at managerial moves from Scotland down south and players moving from Scotland. You need to then go to another level before you get into that top six. So we all know the players that I'm referring to, you know, that have had to go to Southampton or Hull City or various other clubs before they get to that level. And it's the same with managers, isn't it? So I think Brendan Rodgers is very shrewd and he's a mercenary and he's used Celtic. But for another couple of seasons or 3 seasons of that progressive thinking and that development behind the scenes, Kevin, and development of young players, I would take another Brendan Rodgers again. I think the disappointment is worth it.
Of course you would. You would. And I'm never going to argue that. And the problem that we've got would be attracting them here in the first place. And that would take an awful lot of money, and I don't think it's money that we would be willing to spend again. I mean, Rodgers did sign a 4-year contract, which seems now bizarre when we always knew what his end game was going to be, was to get back in the English Premier League. You look at a name like Eddie Howe. Eddie Howe's been linked with the Arsenal job as well over the last number of years when Wenger was leaving. Would he come up here for 2 seasons to try and turn it round, get his name back on the map? Or is he sitting down there already having the nod, saying there's going to be 4 or 5 jobs coming up in January? So you just sit tight just now and you're going to get an appointment back in the English Premier League. It's very difficult for these guys. Maybe be easier to attract. I always liked the old guy. It was in Shakhtar Donetsk. It's recently took over at Dynamo Kiev. See, like the old wily Romanian, was it Popescu? What was it? Mm-hmm. Can't remember his name. But this guy who done wonders with Shakhtar Donetsk. And I'm going, why do you not just go and get him? Just go and come and do what you've done in Donetsk. Why come here? Because his teams were always organised, always done well in Europe. I understand that they could sign South Americans that we couldn't sign. And the Ukrainians maybe have a better level of player, but there didn't seem to be any forward thinking with the board with managerial appointments or managerial targets. I mean, you have a look at the targets that have been named over the last 6 weeks. It's very, very boring, isn't it? There's nothing left field. There's nothing out the box. There's like the other day there.
Where are you? Because I know that you've told us what you expect the Celtic board to do should there be a change. And by the way, I'm going to go back to some of the questions on the AGM in just a moment as well, Kevin. Some other points to dissect and disagree with and criticise, because we're allowed to criticise. But what name do you think, if we're being realistic, you know, because I keep saying that, we brought in Brendan Rodgers at a time where he had only won 1 trophy in his managerial career. He was a failure at Liverpool. And he'll always be remembered as such. And at that point, pre-Celtic, he had managed 316 games, 3 seasons in the Championship, 46.52% win rate. Is that the kind of level of manager? Are we going for an unemployed manager, as we have done in our last 2 appointments?
The manager that we've got to go for is somebody who marks or who fits the long-term development of the club. And I don't think we've ever... I think Dylan and Rodgers showed what the club were trying to do. They were trying to develop young players. And appointing Neil Lennon was completely against what you had done for the previous 5 years.
Yeah.
And that's how I've always said that Neil Lennon was the wrong fit at the wrong time. Mm-hmm. When you look at the player, the next manager that comes in has got to develop players. Because COVID's going to absolutely knacker the transfer market. Brexit's going to knacker the transfer market for us, bringing in foreigners from foreigners for other leagues there. Of course, they come from other countries and other leagues, bringing in players from abroad. So we've got to bring in a manager who's got a proven track record or a philosophy of developing players, and that's where it's got to be. And I would expect there'll be football guys that we will be taking counsel from football men who'll be able to point us in the correct direction. But the names that are being mentioned, like your Martin O'Neills and your Paul Lamberts, are not guys that fit that bill.
What do you think of the idea of someone or a team, a partnership, like, let's say, Mark Hughes and Mark Bowen, whose names have come up several times on the Axon Bulletin. I'm not saying no to any of the names that have been mentioned, but I think that Celtic fans, our expectations might be pretty high if we do change the manager. I've seen some top class names. I've even mentioned Martinez and Maloney myself, just to get the flack that I know was coming the minute I said it. But what about Mark Hughes, Mark Bowen, and possibly one of their countrymen that has a knowledge of Celtic Football Club coming in as a team?
I must admit, there was a certain website had an article last week when it was talking about it's only going to be desperate out of work managers with not the right experience to take over at Celtic. And I was thinking about that, and you've mentioned Mark Hughes a couple of times on this show, and I was going, wait a minute, Mark Hughes is had managed Man City under the Qataris. He's won loads as a player under Alex Ferguson. He done extremely well with Stoke. I think he got Stoke their highest placed English Premiership finish. Mm-hmm. He's managed a national team. He's got more bloody experience than Neil Lennon.
A lot more.
A lot more, and he's done a lot more than what Neil Lennon's done over his career as well. I'm talking out with Celtic, and I'm going, why would we automatically think that would be a bad appointment? The reason we think it's a bad appointment is because he's no fashionable.
He's not in vogue.
He's no flavour of the month. He's not kicking about like Arteta and Guardiola with 3/4 length trousers and £1,000 cardigans on it, and talking about low blocks, high blocks, and.
But you're right in what you say. I mean, 610 games at the very highest level, either at an international level as a manager or in the EPL. Never managed outside the top division. And by the way, I just think that, it's one of the jobs that I think that there's a number of candidates who initially there's a perception that they're maybe out of touch, etc. He managed just over a year ago, and I don't think that a management team like that are certainly going to be on the same level as we currently have. I think that's what I'm saying. If you brought that in, there really is a proper strategy to a coaching and management team such as the two Marks. And I know that as soon as you mention anybody, you're going to get comments coming in. Kevin, you mentioned Jack Ross because you think that's the kind of candidate that this current Celtic board would be interested in. No matter who you mention, you're going to get criticism. But let's have a look at some of the answers that came in from Neil Lennon. And Peter Lobo reiterated that Neil Lennon is the man to take Celtic forward and believes performances are improving. Well, he must just be looking at the last two games there. He believes that he can turn things round because he has a proven track record of winning trophies. But, you're looking in the past there, Kevin, if you ask me, because I'm going to disagree with what Peter Lobo said there. Anyone who is a Celtic fan, anyone who's watched Celtic this season knows that all season we've been completely off it. We've been miles away from performances that's going to win anything. And Neil Lennon has not changed it sufficiently until the last two games. Lo and behold, the personnel that have come in, partly by luck, certainly not fully by design, have really re-energised the Celtic side. Then we get the comments, and we'll come back to these as well, Kevin, after the game, whereby Neil Lennon said that there might be one or two talking about the new faces appearing in the Scottish Cup final. I'd like to think the hardcore that got us there will have the opportunity to play in it. Well, I don't think football works like that, does it? I mean, you don't bring back Scott Brown because he assisted last season in us getting to the Scottish Cup final. He's not been up to standard for me to be starting the Scottish Cup final. I already had a discussion with you yesterday about Edouard, and for what it's worth, I agree with you. I think Edouard will start, but if you're basing it on current form, Edouard wouldn't start. Frimpong potentially wouldn't start, and certainly Scott Brown wouldn't either. You'd be looking at Shane Duffy, who has come in and played. I actually thought he played better yesterday than he did on Thursday, Kevin. I thought that was his best game in a Celtic jersey yesterday. That bodes well. He's even spoken. He's come out. He's been brutally honest about his performances to date. and the fact that obviously the confidence is starting to grow and build. So you're expecting him and Julien in the centre. You're expecting, because of that, Ayer at right back. I'm not sure what he'll do at left back. I prefer Laxalt to Taylor, personally. And I think he's got a better understanding with El Yunusi in front of him as well. But these are all the questions that we won't know the answer to until about 1 o'clock or 1:15 on Sunday afternoon. But the hints were there after the match, Kevin, that Lenny's going to revert to type. How concerning is that for you?
It is concerning, but I says it yesterday, I wouldn't be any surprised. We need to give a chance to the players that got us there. Well, there's a number of players no longer there. Are they going to ask Fraser Foster to come back up for the weekend?
That'd be nice.
It's like, so you can't say that. We've got to have a look on form. I can't see us going into a cup final without our captain. I just can't see that happening. But what you mentioned there was Laxalt. How do we think about this? I think Greg Taylor's a wild card to start. I really do. I think he played well yesterday. He done more in the final third than what Laxalt's done over the last couple of weeks. And I think he suited our system better yesterday. So I think Greg Taylor's maybe had a good, played himself into actually starting on Sunday instead of Laxalt.
Talking about Taylor, let's go back to the 2 penalty shouts from yesterday, Kevin, because I know that you've been presented with some evidence since then. Have you changed your mind on the Taylor foul by the goalkeeper or the handball at the back post? Have you changed your mind on any of the 2 penalty shouts?
Well, I don't think I need to change my mind on the handball. I did say it was a penalty in the letter of the law.
But
I did say that.
But you don't think it should have been a penalty?
I think it's a harsh penalty. But then I do think it's a harsh penalty. But then I have been added it on Twitter. I'm going to say that again because I ken it annoys you. I have been added at Twitter and seen the picture, and I'm going, it looks absolutely horrendous. It looks like a Stonewall penalty kick when you see that picture. The one with the goalkeeper's a penalty now. I says yesterday. Do you
think Maradona handled the ball against England in 1986, Kev? Just so I can get some kind of perspective on this.
Of course not. He outjumped Peter Shilton quite easily and headed the ball in the back of the net.
Thanks for clearing that up, mate. Now, going back to some of the comments, Peter Lowell on contempt from the fans. I understand, says Peter, frustration. It's been a difficult run over 8 weeks. Again, it's longer than 8 weeks. I'm a Celtic supporter. I get it. We understand it. The social media world. Accusations that the board is holding fans in contempt. It can get a wee bit over the top. The support over the summer, they were nothing short of remarkable. I guess he's talking about the season ticket sales. We have no agenda or motive. We haven't given up on the league. There are circumstances that have put us in this position. We will do all we can to win the league. Well, I'm afraid, again, I'm going to disagree with a lot of that. There are mitigating circumstances that have contributed to the position. They're not circumstances that have put them in the position, Kevin, because the mitigating circumstances, let's say, of COVID, of the ball and goalie gate, of Griffiths still not being fit in December, of players undermining the manager by leaking the teams, they're mitigating circumstances. That doesn't fully contribute to the poor performances, the poor coaching, the poor team selection, the poor shape, the loyalty to players that Lenny still seems to have, continuing to play players who are off form. You can't simply say that everything that's happened is to blame. You know, everything outside the bubble of football is to blame. You can't say that.
No. There's been loads of poor decisions made. And if they're talking about mitigating circumstances, explain them. Explain the mitigating circumstances. Because they're trying to imply there that they know more than us. And of course they should know more than us, but they need to tell us, why are you making the decision you're actually making? Is it because you told 4 players that they had to stay? Then you bring in a centre half earning 50 grand a week, and he's just upset the apple cart, and you've got these players who now want to leave. I think January is going to be massive. I think you'll see who the bad apples are in January, and you'll see a few players moving on in January. This cup final, as I said yesterday, feels like a bookmark, and we can move on after this cup final.
Well, Kevin, I think one player who's definitely for the off is Olivier Ntcham. He's kind of gone AWOL, hasn't he? He's not been on the bench. I know that there was a suggestion that he had picked up an injury for the European game. But again, with the emergence of David Turnbull in a position that we're already, there's a gluttony of talent in there, isn't there? You've got Rodgers, who's not getting a game. You've got Christie, who's trying to fight back into the team, El Yunusi, and of course you've got Turnbull. So I can't see for a moment Ntcham being anywhere near that team. So if we get a decent offer for someone like Ntcham, you take it.
You do. And on the other hand, if you get a decent offer for this season's Eddie, you take it. Because, I mean, you're talking about centre forwards for Sunday. We haven't got a centre forward we can trust at the moment.
There's not one on form or fit.
There's no one that you go, he's a definite starter. And the only reason I say that Eddie was a definite starter is because of previous.
Yeah.
But you've got the four of them there, and you go, I didn't trust any of the four who used to actually start the game.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a sad indictment of the talent within the four of them.
No, you're right. Now, Neil Lennon's been talking about the Scottish Cup final. And before I go into the comments, just to remind everybody that we are running a massive charity event next weekend. It's for the Quadruple Treble, and I'm not taking that for granted, but that's a good title for the charity event. I think next year we'll call it the Axon Weekender, Kev, and it might be an outdoor event, who knows. But we've already raised an incredible amount of money. I mean, we're sitting at the moment, let me just refresh the GoFundMe page, at £5,340. As we speak, one of the Axon team are calling up companies to try and get more sponsorship. We're going to try and get a sponsor for every single show, Kevin, of which there are going to be 22 different shows. A Celtic State of Mind will be one of those shows, and we'll cover, I think it's 3 hours over the actual Scottish Cup final action, Kevin. The other 21 shows from the likes of the Homeboys, Four Tims on a Pod, Celtic Underground, The Cynic, E-Tims, it goes on and on and on. Brilliant. As well as people like the Kano Foundation, St. Roch's. They will have 1 hour slots, and we're looking for sponsors to appear on the top of the screen, like the FansBet sponsor appears on this particular screen. So we're trying to raise as much as possible. It might be something that's a wee bit pie in the sky, but I'm hoping that we have 10 grand in the bank before we even go into the Saturday's game, Kevin. It is possible. We've had a couple of more pledges coming in. We've also had some tremendous items coming in for an auction that we're going to be running simultaneously. Signed jerseys, match-worn jerseys, they're all starting to come in from people who have been fans of the show for some time. So thanks everybody for getting involved. The link, if you want to throw a couple of pound in a pot, is underneath the video. So please contribute whatever you can. There are 4 brilliant charities, Kev. But we will be covering the Scottish Cup final. We'll be doing it live because it's 2 12-hour broadcasts, all live. So you'll see our reaction, and hopefully it's a good one when we're playing Hearts. But Neil Lennon is talking about the game, and he says recent success is unprecedented. It means so much to the players. So I guess he is talking about the Quadruple Treble. We won't ever see the likes of it again. Hopefully we can come away with another piece of silverware. So, it's not saying much there, to be fair. Talking about Celtic's poor form, however, he says that we need fans back. It affects players subconsciously. We need that rawness. It means everything to me to turn things around, and there are signs of things really improving. I think there have been some positives over the last couple of games, Kevin. We need fans back. Yeah, I'm sure that would add to it, but it won't add to poor shape, poor squad management, poor game management, poor performances by a number of players who don't want to be at the club. So that, again, is a big sweeping generalisation that I don't buy. We've lost players to COVID. There's been some anxiety from the players overthinking their play. We look at the physical data, and it's the same as last year. We've been antsy in the final third. I've told play 2 up front, Neil. I've told players about turning seasons around. So, it's all this kind of stuff. I believe I can do it. I've contributed 5 titles. We've heard all this before after the post-matches, Kevin. Is he saying anything that convinces you that he's still the man for the job?
No, it doesn't. I still think this is just a lot of wind and rubbish. We all know a change is going to get made. It's just a matter of when. I think that change will happen in January. I've said that quite a lot. He does make some decent points. Look, this will only be the thing about the crowds, I says this earlier on this season, and I started thinking about it, and I saw a stat this morning actually, which saying that in the Scottish Premier League, there's been more away wins this season than actually home wins. And then it got me thinking that maybe the crowds do make a difference. And I've always seen the Celtic side as an emotional side. I've always seen us as thriving on the emotion of the 12th man, which is us.
You say you attribute that to Lenny Ball. We speak about Lenny Ball. You think a lot of that is just raw emotion, isn't it?
Just raw emotion. That's what I think it is, eh? Yeah. And I do think there maybe has been times where you've seen it yourself if you've been in an away game or something like that, and it's maybe one each and you're going for a winner and it's the last 15 minutes where you're in that away end and the away end is absolutely vibrant and bouncing and you seem to be sucking the ball into the back of the net and you're actually doing that. I mean, maybe that shows us what a great support we are, that this team's could win 4 trebles. And we've been utterly shite this season with no fans there. Maybe it is all down to us. Maybe we are the key.
Wow. You really are trying to stay in Peter Lobo's good books, Kev. I mean, you're talking about soaking the ball into the goal. Remember Uri Geller went to watch Fulham? Remember with Michael Jackson? I didn't think they won that game. But I mean, you're talking about bending balls and all that kind of stuff. He was more into bending spoons, I believe. But Robert Arbuckle's looking for an analogy, if you can serve one up on a plate for us. But Stephen Wilson on YouTube states that I wasn't convinced with the manager's statement about the team for the cup final. Me neither, Stephen. I'm in your boat with that one. I was astonished, to be honest. Or should I even be astonished? I mean, when you're looking at current form, we've had a massive problem, Kevin, this season with the goalkeeper. You mentioned Foster earlier on. He's never been far from our minds, and Stevie Mullen basically said last week if Foster wanted to be at Celtic, he'd be here. So we went out and spent the best part of £5 million on a Greek international goalkeeper. We've never spent as much money as that on a goalkeeper ever. You know, it's a record for Celtic. It's not happened. It's not worked for them. It might happen. Who knows? It doesn't look very promising, to be fair. Scott Bain's our third choice Celtic goalkeeper, and he's played a lot of games and some important games this season. So we've gone for the only option we had left, which was Connor Hazard. And for 2 games, he's been a commanding presence at the back. I mean, I know he lost a couple of goals, but he lost them against a quality side in Lille, Kevin. One of the best sides we're going to face all season, if not the best. Them and AC Milan have both been very impressive. So for me, he deserves the jersey. He deserves the gloves come Sunday in the Scottish Cup final, even though he's only played a couple of games for the first team. I don't think that matters. It's all about form. You look at Duffy. Duffy, I thought, was on his way out in January, Kevin. We've asked the question, is there a release clause? Can you send him back to Brighton? All of a sudden, he comes in against Lille. Still looks a bit cumbersome, makes a few errors. But then he was assured. He was assured in the bread and butter games, which is all we've got left now. The bread and butter games of yesterday, he was assured. You could see him brimming with confidence. He's back up there. He's becoming even more of an aerial threat because we've now got someone who can cross a ball in Turnbull. So brilliant, excellent. So he's got to start. And if he starts, then Ayer's at right back. You then move into Sorrow territory, and I take your point. If Sorrow plays, Scott Brown doesn't, basically. Would you agree with that? Yeah. He deserves to play. Based on the last 2 games, Sorrow deserves to play.
I definitely Sorrow does deserve to play, but I was trying to think. Brendan Rodgers didn't play Scott Brown in a cup final, and he came on as a sub with about 8 minutes to go against Aberdeen. Was it 2 seasons ago, League Cup final? But I can't remember if Scott Brown was just turning back, coming back for injury at that point. So I just can't see. I mean, I think there's maybe a bit of gamesmanship in Neil Lennon's comments, putting a bit of doubt in Hearts' minds who he's going to play. And he's going, I'm going to go back with the tried and trusted. So Hearts will maybe set up their team in a certain way to play certain players. Then he drops the grenade on the day, and he keeps the same team as the week before. So there could well just be a bit of gamesmanship going on with Lennon yesterday. And also he needs to keep the players on their toes, So he's got to keep his cards close to his chest. So you're right. If Sorrow plays, Scott Brown doesn't start. That's the only way. I can fit Turnbull in my team without I can fit Turnbull in my team, but I can't. But I couldn't fit Scott Brown in my team.
It's going to be an interesting lineup. I think both Sorrell and Turnbull deserve their jerseys. I also think that the goalkeeper has done enough, Hazard. I still think we'll go into the market for a new goalie, Kevin. Which, it seems unfair, because if we ever want to have anybody developing and coming into the first team and keeping their jersey, they've got to get games. But it's a long, hard season, and if anything was to happen to Conor Hazard, be that suspension or injury, then you're calling back on two guys that haven't done the business. So I can still see us going into the market, and why go in for a third or a second choice? You're going to go in for someone you're going to play, I think. So we'll see how that develops. There's been a few comments in relation to my reading of the AGM comments, and Adam believes that what I'm saying is negative. And Adam, no doubt a nice guy. Well, some might disagree with that. However, listen, I can take any level of criticism whatsoever. But to be honest with you, sir, I don't think it's negative to question and criticise the Celtic board. I think it's absolutely necessary. I think it's not an entitled kind of view, Kevin. I think it's about standards. It's about maintaining a standard, not accepting defeat. And at the moment, if we listen to what Peter Lawwell and Neil Lennon's just said, you could curl up in a ball, come back out in May, and we'll be second in the league at best. So when we're talking about change, it's only because we don't want to be second best or even worse in Scottish football. And I keep going on about demands. I think Celtic fans are demanding rather than entitled. So when you question the board, Kevin, some people see it as negative. How do you take criticism of Celtic and your big pal Peter on the board?
Most of the time it's deserved. There's very little time that I disagree with any slingshots that are fired at the board. I've always been honest with my opinions of the board, and we've got to. Overall, we are an intelligent support, I reckon. We're very football minded, and we don't just fire criticism. We're not a knee-jerk support. We really are not a knee-jerk support. As I've said, the stuff that we're talking about has been spoken about for years and years. The clubs need to be. You need to actually question your club, or you end up going out of business, or you end up or you could get took down some dark holes if you don't question what's going on at your football club. And we need it. We need strong and robust talks. We need to be honest with each other. You've got to be honest with each other.
Yeah.
And I can say, I'm not going to mention being in meetings and all of that in a past life and that, but I have been. And I have been in a room with 50 other guys, and I've seen Peter Wall get some extremely tough questions, which haven't been put to him before. I remember one meeting where the first question was, when are you resigning, Peter? That was the first question.
I think Adam's just asked me that question there as well, Kev. So you might be presenting the show tomorrow.
Oh no, that will be a disaster if I have to present this.
Hiking and biking Scotland and Cham. This is a good point actually, and you're making it on YouTube. So if you are watching on YouTube, please subscribe. It's all free. And Cham has been a passenger for nearly 2 years. Move him on. If you think about the pre-season just after Neil Lennon got the job permanently, Kevin, and Cham was mouthing off to the French press, if you'll remember, talking about being the best player in the Scottish League. It's no longer a challenge. He needs a move to develop. Remember all that? And I don't think there were many Celtic fans around about that time who would have been unhappy to see him go. Now, although I'll criticise Neil Lennon, particularly for this season, where I think that he's been to blame for a lot of Celtic's ills, I praised him at that time for his man management ability, because he managed to get Cham back, not just back at Celtic, he managed to get him back in the team and playing pretty well last season for spells. I mean, we remember back to the Lazio victory. You can't remember that game without the celebration of Cham after the winning goal. So, Cham, there's a player in there, Kevin, but I just think there comes a point, and particularly in modern football, there comes a point where it's time to go for players, isn't there? And managers as well. A lot of people think it's a 3-year thing, whereby, there comes a point where they are looking to move on and progress, change of scenery, change of management, change of setup, change of environment, country, whatever it might be. And I think Cham's at that stage now, and he's in a position where we could afford to sell him. It
looks like he's been at that stage for about 18 months. we're always going to look back on Charm's Celtic career with regret because he's got that much talent. He could have been an utter legend with us, but he just hasn't got it to do it week in, week out. Whether he just doesn't fancy the Scottish game or he thinks that he's too good for the Scottish game. Mm-hmm. But that's where he was. That's where he is. That's where he's getting his money. And there is times when you see him playing balls, and you go, no, nobody in Scottish football can play that. I know. He's got that in him, but he just doesn't turn up. And I remember earlier on, I went, sometimes you want a 6 or 7, a guy who produces 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10 on a weekly basis for you, rather than you want somebody that's a 9 one week and a 2 the following week. Sometimes you want the tired and the dependable player, rather than somebody you're putting on the park going, I wonder if he's going to turn up today. And Charms in the latter category there.
Mm-hmm. No, you're absolutely right. And I think that we're at the risk, Kevin, if we are too loyal to some of the players who have been great servants over the piece, over the quadruple treble era, if you like. We're at risk of reintroducing them into a side and also reintroducing that staleness that we had seen creeping into Celtic's team. For me, I get your point about... Here's a question. I get your point about Scott Brown. Here's a question for you. I guess he won't be allowed to sit in the dugout because obviously the subs all sit in the stand, don't they? I think he'd be more of an influence as actually one of Lenny's allies during the game, sitting in the dugout. Still a player, still on the bench, but I actually think he's got such an influence, Kevin, over his teammates. They've all seen him as the captain over the last 9 seasons. The newer players have known nothing different than Scott Brown as a captain. But I genuinely would start with McGregor as a captain. Brown would be, I say on the bench, but I mean that kind of metaphorically. But if he could actually be on the bench, I don't know, is he allowed on the bench? Is it coaching staff only at the moment?
Hampden's different, because it is quite a large technical area anyway. Mm-hmm. And behind, so they come down onto the touchline. He wouldn't be allowed in the coaching area, I don't think. But when he's out warming up, he could surely give a bit of motivation. I'm sure he does. When he's out warming up, I'm sure he does speak to the players. He seems that type of guy. Mm-hmm. He was doing his coaching badges, because he was taking the development squad. I mean, my thought always was that if we ended up with John Kennedy as an interim manager, that you would likely to have seen Scott Brown move on to the coaching staff at that point if Neil had gone in the last couple of weeks. I always had that thought that Scott Brown would end up as part of an interim coaching team, mm-hmm. and possibly part of the coaching team going forward. And that could still actually happen.
It possibly could. I mean, Terry Tibbs comes in via YouTube to ask why Irish Mick is not involved. And I think what you're referring to is the weekender. Well, listen, Irish Mick is welcome. And what I'll actually do, we've got 3 hours, Kevin, over the actual game. We've got 3 hours. And what I'm planning to do is just get, dialing people in and out during that 3 hour period. So if anybody actually wants to dial in, send me a message, give me your email address, and depending on your level of intoxication at the time, I'll just dial you into the game and we can have a bit of chat. And I think what I'll also do is I'll probably throw that out to a lot of the guys that we've maybe been in touch with, Kevin, over the years. This isn't me name dropping, but we've interviewed quite a lot of players over the years who have come kind of pally with, it'd be good to maybe dial in Brian McClare and guys like that, maybe Simon Donnelly, just to see what they're thinking if they're not already on journalistic duties, media duties somewhere else.
It would be brilliant, and especially Brian McClare. We need to utilise Brian more often because he's brilliant. I love Brian McClare. I really do.
No, he is. He's great. He's a great chat. And the unfortunate thing with Brian is he can't say on record anything that went on at the SFA because there's a contract stopping him from saying it. But if you ask him off the record, he'll tell you all about it, which is always good fun as well to hear the ins and outs of the SFA and the inner workings of that establishment. So, I mean, looking at transfer priorities, looking at January, Kevin, I've mentioned the goalkeeper. I still think we will strengthen in that department. I think there's going to be quite a few departures as well. Where else would you strengthen looking at that Celtic side?
I think we probably need to bring in some wide forwards, wide midfielders. I think we can't rely on Forrest coming back and getting up to speed as quick. If any of the other injuries that we've had this season's proved, it could be months before Forrest is back up to speed. So we probably need a winger. If we sell a centre forward, we'd probably need a centre forward as well. But trying to bring a quality one in January is going to be difficult as well, because most teams won't sell their top man in January. It's really difficult. I think it really depends on who goes. I think it does. I think it does. I think it really, really depends on who goes. January again. Who's going to be buying the players in January? That's another word. There's that comment there. Who's going to be buying these players in January? And I'm looking forward. I'm actually not looking ahead to January now. I'm actually looking forward to this weekend. I've got a bit of a wee spring in my step, and I'm looking forward to this, which feels like a bookend or something. It feels like we can move on after this Sunday, and hopefully we move on with another cup one.
Absolutely, Kevin. Absolutely. I think a lot of people have asked me, does the last two results change anything? Well, obviously it changes the very immediate term of Celtic trying to get some momentum going in this title race, trying to turn it around, trying to salvage something from this season. But the more deeper rooted issues were obviously the reason why there was a protest outside the ground. Mm-hmm. Now, what was your thoughts on that? I was reading the comments and the statement that was made by who was called the chairman of the trust. Jeanette Finlay's not the chairman, is she? Not the chairperson of the trust. I thought it was David Lowe.
What was David Lowe?
But I think it was maybe misquoted. But Jeanette certainly said a few words about the protest and why Celtic fans were protesting. Kevin, what was your overall view of the protests yesterday?
They were peaceful. They gave the team a fantastic reception when they came off the bus. Everybody's got a right to protest. It just didn't sit right with me protesting in a pandemic. That just didn't sit right with me at all. The Trust have got their own agenda, and that sounds bad, but the Trust want to buy shares and get people on the board, get a fan representation on the board, and that's what they were protesting about. Fair play to the Trust; they're very vocal, they're very public, and good luck to them in the future.
Well, Red Scotland is still on the Irish Mick case at the moment, and he reckons that Mick would bring a lot to the event. He is enthusiastic and off the cuff. Does anybody know Irish Mick? Can you put us in touch? I'm more than happy to dial him in at some point during the 3-hour slot that Axom have got that weekend, Kevin. It might be quite amusing.
Is Irish Mick actually Irish?
I don't know.
Did I know read that? He plays it being Irish.
He's from Bowness, I think. Anyway, possibly I just made that up. So thanks everybody for getting involved. I will remind you that underneath this video there is a link that takes you to the GoFundMe page. It's an incredible amount so far, and some brilliant donations of items for the auction as well. We've got some more messages coming in, Kevin, some fantastic video messages coming in this week as well from Celtic fans, ex-players, those from the music industry as well. So I'm hoping for a big turnout on the weekend. Sometimes over one game a weekend, Kevin, we've had up to 67 to 70,000 people tuning in on one day. So we're hoping to, over a period of 24 hours, have a couple of hundred people coming in, and hopefully we can raise a lot of money for people who are going to be extremely vulnerable, even more so than normal this Christmas as well. So that's really in the spirit of Celtic. That is what being Celtic minded and of a Celtic state of mind is all about, I would say, Kev, that charitable element. So thank you everybody for getting involved. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe on YouTube. Once again, Kevin Graham, thank you for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Cheers, lads.